Imagine you're in love with someone who makes you believe in forever. You've built dreams together, shared secrets, weathered storms as a team. But then you discover that the biggest threat to your relationship isn't another woman trying to steal your partner. It's someone who's already family, someone who's supposed to be on your side. This is the story of Sophia Chen, a 34-year-old marketing director living in Portland, Oregon, who learned the hard way that sometimes the people closest to your partner can become the very forces that tear you apart. 3.5 years ago, Sophia met Ryan Mitchell at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. He was 30, a talented graphic designer with kind eyes and an easy laugh that made her feel instantly comfortable. Their connection was immediate, the kind of chemistry that makes you forget about everyone else in the room. Ryan came with a built-in best friend, his twin brother Connor. The Mitchell twins were inseparable, sharing that unique bond that only twins understand. They finished each other's sentences, had their own inside jokes, and genuinely enjoyed spending time together. Sophia found their relationship endearing, until she met Connor's wife. Madison Pierce Mitchell was a 28-year-old fitness influencer with perfectly contoured cheekbones and a smile that could launch 1,000 Instagram campaigns. She had married Connor during the pandemic, and during those isolated months, something had shifted in the family dynamic. Madison, Ryan, and Connor had formed an unusually tight trio, gaming together for hours, FaceTiming daily, and creating a bond that felt more like a teenage friend group than a typical extended family relationship. At first, Sophia was charmed by how close they all were. Madison seemed to genuinely care about both brothers, and she'd even helped Ryan and Connor reconcile after a childhood falling out that had left them distant for years. Sophia appreciated having a potential sister-in-law who valued family connections. But as months passed, Sophia began noticing things that made her increasingly uncomfortable. The warning signs started small, almost too subtle to name. Madison had a way of dominating conversations whenever the four of them were together. She told provocative stories about her college years, her modeling shoots, her wild phase before marriage. She dressed in ways that seemed designed to draw attention. Crop tops to family dinners, bikinis that left little to imagination during pool parties, workout clothes so form-fitting they looked painted on. Sophia tried to brush off her discomfort. Madison was young, confident, used to being the center of attention. Maybe this was just her personality. But then came the group text incident. Madison created a family group chat for planning Connor's surprise birthday party. Everyone was included: Ryan, Connor's parents, his sister, close family friends. Everyone except Sophia. When Sophia mentioned it to Ryan, he looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, that's weird. I'm sure it was just an oversight," he said, immediately adding Sophia to the chat. But Madison's response was telling. "Sorry. I guess I forgot." The reply felt deliberate, dismissive. Like Sophia's exclusion was amusing rather than hurtful. The real turning point came during a long weekend trip to Denver, where Connor and Madison had recently moved. The plan was simple: 2 couples, a few days of sightseeing, good food, and quality time together. The weekend started well enough. They explored the city, tried local breweries, took photos at scenic overlooks. But on Saturday night, everything changed. They were back at Connor and Madison's apartment, drinks flowing, everyone relaxed and laughing. Connor had rolled a joint, something they rarely did, but it was vacation, and inhibitions were lowered. The conversation was typical late-night rambling. Funny stories, philosophical debates, shared memories. Then Madison stood up from her spot on the couch. "I feel like dancing," she announced, and before anyone could respond, she began moving to the music in ways that belonged in a nightclub, not a living room with her husband and his brother. Her movements were deliberate, sensual, designed to captivate. She locked eyes with Ryan as she danced, running her hands through her hair, swaying her hips with practiced precision. Sophia watched in stunned silence as her boyfriend's face lit up with appreciation. "Go, Madison!" Ryan cheered, clapping enthusiastically. "You've got moves." Connor, clearly uncomfortable, tried to laugh it off. "Okay, babe, maybe sit down now?" But Madison continued for another full minute, feeding off Ryan's encouragement, basking in the attention. When she finally stopped, she looked directly at Ryan with a satisfied smile, as if they'd shared some private moment. Sophia felt sick to her stomach. Not because Madison had danced. People dance. But because of how Ryan had responded. The enthusiasm in his voice, the way he'd watched Madison with an intensity he rarely showed toward anything, the guilty look that flashed across his face when he finally noticed Sophia's expression. That night, lying in the guest bedroom while Ryan slept soundly beside her, Sophia stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was losing her mind. Was she overreacting? Was this just harmless fun between family members? But deep in her gut, she knew something was wrong. Back in Portland, Sophia began noticing things she'd previously overlooked. Madison's social media posts always featured both brothers, but Sophia was systematically edited out. Group photos were cropped to exclude her. Stories about family time never mentioned her presence, even when she'd been there. During family gatherings, Madison had a way of positioning herself between Ryan and Sophia. She'd save seats, suggest seating arrangements, create physical barriers that seemed innocent but felt calculated. She had inside jokes with Ryan that excluded everyone else, references to their gaming sessions or private conversations that made Sophia feel like an outsider in her own relationship. Madison thrived on being the only woman in the room who mattered. She told inappropriate stories about her body, her past relationships, her modeling shoots. She steered conversations toward sexual topics with a frequency that felt deliberate. And through it all, Ryan hung on her every word. Sophia watched her boyfriend transform around Madison. He became more animated, more engaged, more present than he was in their own conversations. He laughed louder at Madison's jokes, complimented her more frequently, and seemed to seek her approval in ways that made Sophia's chest tighten with anxiety. The most painful part was how Madison treated Sophia like she was temporary. Like someone passing through rather than Ryan's serious girlfriend of 3 years. Madison never asked about Sophia's job, her family, her interests. She never included her in planning or decision-making. She acted like Sophia was Ryan's casual dating phase rather than his long-term partner. Sophia tried everything. She had calm, rational conversations with Ryan about boundaries. She explained how Madison's behavior made her feel excluded and disrespected. She asked him to consider how he'd feel if the situation were reversed. Ryan's responses followed a predictable pattern: initial defensiveness, followed by promises to do better, followed by absolutely no change in behavior. "You're reading too much into it," he'd say. "Madison's just friendly. She's trying to include me because Connor wants us all to be close." "But what about how it makes me feel?" Sophia would ask. "I love you," Ryan would insist. "You're the one I'm with. Madison is Connor's wife. She's family. There's nothing inappropriate happening." And technically, he was right. Madison never crossed obvious lines. She never made explicit advances or said anything clearly inappropriate. Her behavior existed in the gray areas of plausible deniability, flirty but not obvious, attention-seeking but not blatantly sexual, exclusive but not overtly cruel. But Sophia knew the difference between someone who was naturally outgoing and someone who was deliberately undermining her relationship. Madison's behavior felt strategic, designed to create intimacy with Ryan while making Sophia feel like the outsider. After 6 months of repeated conversations that led nowhere, Sophia realized a devastating truth. Ryan either couldn't see what was happening, or he could see it and didn't care enough to stop it. The end came during Connor and Madison's visit to Portland for Ryan's birthday. Sophia had planned a perfect weekend: dinner at Ryan's favorite restaurant, tickets to a concert he'd been wanting to see, a surprise party with his closest friends. But Madison had other plans. From the moment they arrived, Madison dominated Ryan's attention. She clung to his arm during dinner, insisted on sitting next to him at the concert, and made sure she was in every photo from his birthday celebration. She told embarrassing stories about Sophia to Ryan's friends, subtle digs disguised as humor that left Sophia feeling humiliated and small. The breaking point came late Saturday night, back at Ryan and Sophia's apartment. They'd all been drinking, celebrating, letting loose. Sophia excused herself to use the bathroom, grateful for a moment of peace away from Madison's constant performance. When she returned to the living room, she found a scene that would replay in her mind for months afterward. Madison was on her knees in front of Connor, who was sitting on the couch. Her body language was suggestive, intimate in a way that felt inappropriate for a room full of people. But what shattered Sophia's heart wasn't Madison's position. It was Ryan's reaction. He was watching intently, his expression guilty but captivated, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. When Sophia walked in, all three of them froze. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. "What's going on?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Madison immediately moved away from Connor, laughing nervously. "Just showing him this funny video on my phone," she said, but her explanation felt hollow, rehearsed. Ryan wouldn't meet Sophia's eyes. Connor looked mortified, whether from embarrassment or something else entirely. That night, Sophia lay awake staring at the ceiling while Ryan slept, and she finally understood something that had taken her 3 years to learn. Boundaries aren't just about what you're willing to accept from others. They're about what you demand from the person who's supposed to protect your heart. The conversation that ended their relationship happened 2 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday morning in their kitchen. Sophia had spent those 2 weeks thinking, analyzing, trying to find a way forward that didn't involve losing the man she loved. "I can't do this anymore," she said simply, setting down her coffee cup with hands that weren't quite steady. Ryan looked up from his laptop, confused. "Do what?" "This relationship. This dynamic. This feeling like I'm competing with your sister-in-law for your attention and losing." Ryan's face cycled through emotions. Surprise, frustration, resignation. "Sophia, we've talked about this so many times. Madison is family. I can't just cut her out of my life." "I'm not asking you to cut her out," Sophia said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm asking you to establish boundaries that protect what we have. I'm asking you to make me feel like I matter as much as she does." "You know you matter to me." "Do I?" "Because for 3 years, I've watched you light up around her in ways you never do around me. I've watched you seek her approval, laugh at her stories, encourage her behavior even when it makes me uncomfortable. I've had 20 different conversations with you about this, and nothing has changed." Ryan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Sophia had once found endearing and now just found frustrating. "I don't know what you want me to do," he said helplessly. And that was the moment Sophia realized they were done. "I want you to want to protect what we have," she said quietly. "I want you to care more about how I feel than about keeping Madison happy. I want you to choose us over the path of least resistance." "I do choose us." "No, you don't. You choose whatever keeps everyone else comfortable, even if it makes me miserable." The silence stretched between them, filled with 3 years of love and frustration and unresolved hurt. "So what are you saying?" Ryan asked finally. "I'm saying I love you too much to keep doing this to myself. I'm saying you deserve someone who doesn't need you to set boundaries, and I deserve someone who wants to set them." Sophia moved out the following weekend. Ryan helped her pack, both of them crying, both of them knowing this was the right decision even though it felt like the wrong one. The months that followed were the hardest of Sophia's life. She questioned her choice daily, wondered if she'd thrown away true love over jealousy and insecurity. She missed Ryan's laugh, his terrible cooking, the way he made her feel safe in a chaotic world. But she also noticed things about herself that had changed during their relationship. She'd become anxious, insecure, constantly second-guessing her own perceptions. She'd lost confidence in her judgment, in her worth, in her right to expect basic respect from her partner. 6 months after their breakup, through mutual friends, Sophia learned that Madison and Connor had separated. Apparently, Connor had finally seen what Sophia had been trying to explain to Ryan for years. Madison's need for attention, her boundary-crossing behavior, her inability to respect the primary relationships in her life. When Sophia heard the news, she felt no satisfaction, no vindication. Just sadness for everyone involved, and clarity about her own choice. Sophia's story isn't really about Madison, although Madison certainly played her part. It's about Ryan's unwillingness to protect their relationship, his choice to prioritize avoiding conflict over preserving trust. In healthy relationships, partners act as shields for each other against outside forces that threaten their bond. They establish boundaries not because they don't trust each other, but because they value what they've built together more than they value keeping everyone else comfortable. Ryan failed this fundamental test repeatedly. When given the choice between making Madison happy and making Sophia feel secure, he chose Madison's comfort every time. When forced to pick between avoiding difficult conversations and preserving his relationship, he chose avoidance. Sophia learned that love without protection is just affection. Commitment without boundaries is just hope. And promises without action are just words designed to buy time until the next crisis. She also learned that some people mistake drama for passion, attention for affection, and conflict for connection. Madison thrived on being desired by men who weren't available to her, feeding off the validation that came from knowing she could capture their attention even when they belonged to someone else. But the most important lesson Sophia learned was about herself. She couldn't control how other people behaved, but she could control whether she accepted a partner who refused to stand up for their relationship. 2 years later, Sophia is in a healthy relationship with someone who doesn't need to be told how to respect boundaries. When his female friends cross lines, he addresses it immediately. When family members make her uncomfortable, he intervenes without being asked. When she expresses concerns, he listens and takes action. This isn't because Sophia found a perfect man. It's because she found a man who understands that protecting their relationship is part of loving her. Sophia sometimes wonders what would have happened if she'd stayed with Ryan, if she'd just learned to live with the discomfort and insecurity. But then she remembers how it felt to constantly question her own perceptions, to feel like she was competing for her boyfriend's attention, to know that her concerns mattered less than maintaining peace. She made the hardest choice, walking away from someone she loved because love alone wasn't enough. She chose her self-respect over false hope, her peace over familiar pain, her future over her past. And in doing so, she discovered something profound. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to accept their worst behavior. Sometimes walking away is the only way to teach someone the value of what they're losing. Sophia's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own relationships. How many of us are tolerating behavior that slowly erodes our self-worth? How many of us are making excuses for partners who consistently choose the comfort of others over our security? How many of us are like Ryan, avoiding difficult conversations because confrontation feels harder than letting our partner suffer in silence? And how many of us are like Madison, seeking validation in ways that damage the relationships around us, confusing attention with love, drama with connection? The truth is, we all have a little of each character in Sophia's story. We've all been the jealous partner, the conflict-avoidant lover, the attention-seeking friend. But recognizing these patterns in ourselves is the first step toward choosing better. Sophia's choice to leave wasn't about giving up on love. It was about refusing to accept a counterfeit version of it. It was about understanding that real love protects, real commitment defends, and real partnership requires both people to prioritize their bond over outside comfort. Her story reminds us that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones brave enough to demand better from us. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do is walk away from someone who won't meet us where we need them to be. Because in the end, we can't love someone into respecting us. We can only love ourselves enough to require it. What do you think? Was Sophia right to walk away from someone she loved over boundary issues? Or should she have been more patient, more understanding of Ryan's difficult position? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between love and self-respect? Share your thoughts in the comments. But remember, the goal isn't to judge these characters, but to learn from their choices and apply those lessons to our own relationships. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe for more real stories about love, relationships, and the complicated choices we make in the name of both.